Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 13, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council. Prior to the start of our meeting, I would like to request that anyone who would like to speak to any items on the agenda tonight, whether they be on the agenda or items not on the agenda, kindly fill out a speaker request form in the back of the room, and we'll see that we get you on. Having made that announcement, roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Here.
Finucane?
Here.
Marquardt?
Here.
Fagan?
Here.
Noriko?
Here.
Verbic?
Here.
Favor?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
8 present.
There are no items that are on our regular agenda that are on this agenda, so we'll move right into public participation. Has anyone registered to speak, Ruth?
No.
To this meeting? Anybody in the audience to speak to any item not on the agenda for this meeting? If not, we'll move forward to our one consideration for our Committee of the Whole meeting, and that is the DeKalb-Taylor Municipal Airport Strategic Plan. And I'd like to ask our Airport Manager, Tom Cleveland, to come to the podium and introduce our special guest tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'll introduce Mr. Jack Penning in a second, but I would like to introduce the airport board members that are here. Yes. We have Chairman Bob Owens. He's our chairman of the airport board. Paul Bork, Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation. And then Gary Hansen, the county administrator, are 3 of our airport board members. And I don't see anybody else. Okay. Tonight I'd like to introduce Mr. Jack Penning. He's with Volair Aviation Incorporated. He is our airport consultant. Jack facilitated our governance study about 4 years ago for the airport, and he also facilitated our strategic plan with our airport advisory board. Now, our airport advisory board worked very hard to put together this strategic plan for the future of the airport. Again, Jack did a very good job, great job facilitating all those meetings that we came up with, all our recommendations for the airport. So I would like to introduce Mr. Jack Penning from Volair Aviation.
Thank you, Tom, and it's great to be here. Last time I presented was when we were presenting recommendations for governance for the airport. And I must say our biggest recommendation was restructuring the Airport Advisory Board, which was the council undertook that. And this board is made up of business leaders, of community leaders, and leaders across the community, not just the city of DeKalb. We thought that was very important because it's an asset not just for the city but for the region. And this board works really well together. It's been a real pleasure to work on this project with this board. Some great ideas. What you will see is 9 key recommendations that the board came up with. We vetted dozens and dozens of ideas. We were able to focus in on the 9 pieces that we felt would best position DeKalb's airport as a business moving forward into the future, and to work to ensure that the airport at minimum is a break-even proposition. So having said that, these are the 9 initiatives that we will go through. The first, transient fueling and pricing. We've made changes to the fuel pricing that has resulted in a large increase in revenue. Updating fueling systems, what's known as Part 139 certification. We'll get into all of these jargon and jingoistic phrases as we go through. Hangar rent, the amount that we charge for that, hangar development. We'll talk about solar development and potentially a very exciting project that has just come onto the radar for us. We'll talk about business development in terms of industrial business, and that was with the help of economic development. We'll talk about the potential for greenhouse use of land, the purchase of adjacent land, and then finally, what's still to come is our branding and marketing plan for the airport, and we will be seeking to move forward with a new way of trying to connect the airport to the community, the larger community, and not just the city itself. The first thing that we did is we keyed in with the board on the vision of the airport. Who do we want to be? Who are we? And then our mission. How do we go about doing business? The board vetted a number of different options for the vision, but we felt it was very important that our vision included economic development. So we're not just here to run an airport. The airport's here to be an economic driver for Northern Illinois. So our vision statement is adopted and approved by the Airport Advisory Board. DeKalb's regional airport seeks to provide innovative solutions for economic development, dedicated to being a global gateway to prosperity. And yeah, we're shooting high, we're aiming very high with this vision, but it's important to know that our customers come from all over the world. We saw jets out there today from Colorado, from the East Coast, from Nantucket, from Wisconsin. These are customers who don't live here and maybe don't know a lot about who we are and what we are, but we have an opportunity to gain more of those customers and help to use that business to support our ultimate goal of developing the economy of the region. And so the vision is very clear. For mission statement, the board adopted the airport is an economic driver for Northern Illinois, fostering development through innovation and engagement with our community and region. We felt it was important to ensure the airport is engaged with the region because when we first started work several years ago, there was a huge disconnect between the value of the airport and knowledge of the airport's value and the community at large. People saw it as a place where people who had a lot of money could go and play around on the weekend with their airplane, and it's a very different kind of facility than that. Our corporations rely upon this airport to get in and out. And for economic development, businesses rely upon it being there so that their executives can get in and out very quickly. And so we've got to do a better job of explaining that, and this mission ensures that we always keep in mind that we should be engaged with our community. Our core values are the same as the city's. As we transferred this to PowerPoint, our professionalism, the M from that ended up on excellence. So trust me, we want to be professional, even though we look very unprofessional with that particular slide. So integrity, professionalism, excellence, service, collaboration, and accountability. So those are the underlying values with which the rest of the strategic plan works to match. So recommendation one, as we get right into what our recommendations are. Number one is fuel pricing. So a couple of years ago, a guy who works at the airport, who you might know, his name is Tom, sitting right here in the yellow tie, said, you know, what would happen if we lowered our fuel prices well below all of Northern Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, in hopes that more people would stop in and fuel here than going to the other airports? We said, well, there's a lot of risk because we make a lot of profit margin on very high priced fuel. But with the support of Public Works, the experiment went forward. And what's happened is we've seen a large increase in fuel sales, and we've seen large increases in both revenue, and we've seen profits increase because we're selling so much more fuel. And so our first recommendation is to continue this project. If you look at this chart, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can definitely see the trend, and the trend is more important than anything. And gallons sold up 80%, sold 60,000 more gallons in 2017 than we did in 2016. That's a ton. And this past July, the numbers are just in, so I'm kind of stealing your thunder, Tom, I hope you don't mind. But July, over 20,000 gallons sold in just 1 month in July. Huge number of sales, and a big piece of that, the Oshkosh Air Show is going on in Wisconsin. Instead of fueling up there, we saw people leaving the air show, stopping here to get a free hot dog, which was provided by the fueling provider, no cost to the city, and pay a lot less for fuel. And so even at one point, the airport ran out of the low lead fuel completely. Had to get a new shipment in for the next morning because there was no more. The tank was dry. So this has been an unmitigated success. It's helping to balance the budget. This is the biggest key moving forward. The biggest piece of low-hanging fruit to increase revenue is to continue this fuel sales strategy. If you look at monthly fuel sales, again, an additional $137,000 in sales 2017 over 2016. That's a huge number. We don't see that very often. So it was an experiment. Now we recommend it be permanent because it is working. Recommendation 2 is another fueling recommendation. There's a new type of fuel for general aviation aircraft that's coming out. Swift fuel, it's called. It's a low lead fuel. There aren't very many airports that sell this. And so our recommendation is that the airport and the city work with the provider, Swift, to adopt this early, because those who want to use this more environmentally friendly and more efficient fuel, it burns more efficiently than what they're using now, would have basically no other place to buy it in our region but here. There could be a potential cost up front, but our recommendation is that the airport and the advisory board work with Swift to mitigate that cost up front, having them have some of the investment in this so that we have essentially the first dibs on this upcoming market. And as we move 10 years down the road, most of the fuel used by general aviation will shift to this type of fuel. So we think that this will position us well for general aviation traffic in the Chicago collar counties over the next decade. Third recommendation is to work through Part 139 certification. So what does that mean? Part 139 is a certification you need to handle commercial-sized jet traffic. We aren't recommending that this be a commercially served airport or that we recruit air service. There's a lot of competition, and at the current time, probably not enough upside financially to make the investment to go after service. But Northern Illinois University in their charters uses large aircraft, commercial aircraft, 150 to 180 seats. Those cannot use our airport right now because we don't have this certification. But certification is exceptionally expensive, and I'll show you a breakdown of that in a moment. It would be very difficult for the city to develop the funding to do all of this at once. But what we can do is, as items need to be fixed, or as we need to repave taxiways or need to repave runways, we can bring them up to 139 standards using grants from the state and from the FAA. By doing that, we click things off the list methodically without putting an undue burden on the city for finances, and in 10, 15 years, we will have a 139 ready airport. If you look at what it would cost just to do this today, if we just wanted to go for Part 139 today, low range, you're looking at a total cost over 10 years of about $245,000 a year. So you're looking at a $2.4 million investment. High range, 3.2. You're probably going to end up on high range, to be honest with you. So you'd need to come up with $320,000 a year in new revenue to pay for this immediately. The new revenue that we forecast is about $104,000 a year. That's just revenue, that's not profit. So we can't come up with enough money, and we've worked through this a number of ways over the last 12 months, to make this financially viable without a large chunk having to come from the city. We don't think it's the right move now, but we can work through items like essentially replacing pieces of the fencing to make sure it's high enough to qualify, as it needs to be replaced anyway, so that we're ready in the long term for certification. Recommendation 4 is a regional hangar rent survey. One thing that we have noted, we have a waiting list for hangar space, but we have what we believe, what Volair believes to be very low rent for hangars. But we don't have enough data available to recommend a specific rent increase, because we have to understand what that does to our current tenants. We don't want to displace a lot of people, but we need to be competitive with the other airports around us. So we are recommending that the board and the airport work through a hangar rent survey of similar facilities, all the airports essentially that are in our region in the Chicago collar, so that we can make sure we're competitive with regional fees. We're leaving money on the table today. We can't figure out exactly how much money we're leaving on the table until we work through this piece of research. But this will also give us a very defensible position from which to raise rent and to ensure that we're getting the most value for our facilities. We have a lot better hangar facilities than a lot of the other airports that are on the west side of Chicago, and we need to ensure that we're charging fairly for those facilities. The fifth recommendation, we looked at the airport because we have a waiting list for hangars, developing new hangars on its own. It's not financially viable. It will take, at our current hangar rent rates, it will take over 30 years to make back what we would invest in building those. So we're recommending that the airport board consider working with private developers that have interest in hangars and just leasing land. The downside to that is we don't get the full revenue we would get from a new hangar. The upside is we don't have any of the development costs. We don't have money in the budget to go out and build hangars right now. And it would take too long to get that revenue to cover the cost. But you're looking at essentially about a $3 million development for a small hangar development. But there are potential private developers that could have interest as the airport grows in doing that on their own. So instead of working to identify what we want to develop, we will work to ensure that we have land available for private developers that's adjacent to the existing infrastructure of taxiways and runways. Our sixth recommendation is exciting, and I would have moved it up if I didn't already have them numbered, but solar array development. We have seen huge swaths of non-aviation land that's owned by airports, so land that's not adjacent to the taxiway or runway, in airports all over the country being developed for solar. Solar works pretty much any time of the year, and cloudy or not, you're still generating power. And so we have actually been approached by a company. Shoot, the map didn't show up on this conversion, but it would be land that's on the northwest side of the airport, across the main road from the rest of the facilities, about 22 acres that's on that northeast side that could be developed for solar. Right now it is leased as farmland. Solar has the potential to generate per year 10 times the revenue to the airport as the land lease for the farming on that particular piece of land. So 10 times the revenue. So if you look at it, it uses land that basically has no aviation value. So we can't use it for any other aviation use because it's across a street from where a plane would need to be, you know, driving on a taxiway. No upfront cost to the airport. A potential for $2,000 per acre per year. That's in new lease revenue. So a 22-acre plot for 21 years would generate $44,000 a year. Right now, that land generates somewhere around $4,000 a year. So this was one of our key recommendations, was to work to identify companies that would be interested in developing solar. The company has come to us now, and it's up to us to vet that potential offer. But in our experience, this is a very good offer for a very small plot of land that generates a lot more revenue than what the land's currently being used for. Recommendation 7 is another use of our land that's not directly adjacent to our runway taxiway facilities, and that's small-scale industrial park and business development. This is one that came entirely from the airport board as they worked through the types of companies that are looking for land in communities like this. The idea is we've got small parcels that we can subdivide as land leases. So for a company that's just getting started, an industrial company that's manufacturing something, or a company that's developing a new technology, we can have a very low-cost land lease, but still higher than the farming use or any other use for that land, while at the same time providing a potential new company a much more cost-effective way to get started. The beauty here, too, is it doesn't take that much land, and we have significant land holdings that are away from the runway and taxiway that can't be used for aviation. So give us land lease revenue we're not getting today. The long-term economic development benefit of this is hopefully these companies grow beyond their space near the airport and they relocate within the city and other locations. And so Paul with economic development was a key piece in putting this strategy together. Obviously, a lot of this strategy rests upon economic development and working to identify companies. and working to locate those companies. But this is another reason why we thought it was so critical the Airport Advisory Board shift in its role from just advising on what lights were burnt out and needed to be replaced in facilities, and to an economic development role. And that's what you have now, and I think this underscores the value of the board. 8, greenhouse farming. There's a lot of greenhouse farming in the region now. General farming, while it's a big piece of revenue for the airport today, the FAA is not real happy having farms all around the airport because wildlife locates to those farms, and wildlife and airplanes don't get along really well. And so what the FAA is encouraging is reuse of land away from traditional farming. By putting plants underneath glass, it keeps the impact of wildlife minimal. There's no other real impact on aviation, but it provides the ability for high-value produce to be grown right next to an airport, where that high-value produce can go onto a cargo plane and get to a market anywhere in the country in a matter of hours as soon as it's picked. And so we've seen in the West this greenhouse farming pop up adjacent to airports. There are several large greenhouse farming operations within 50 miles of this city, including Mighty Vine. They're the largest. As they expand, it's our recommendation that the airport and the advisory board continue conversations with them, because it's likely the airport could provide a lower land lease price than what they could get elsewhere in the region. And it's also likely that the being adjacent to a transportation center like an airport would be attractive to greenhouse farmers in the region. So long term, we see this not only as a way to better use our ag land around the airport and to better protect the airplanes that are flying there, but as a potential way to develop air cargo. And that would help us get to that Part 139 certification as well with larger aircraft. And recommendation 9 is, this is a standard recommendation you'll see every airport advisory board make, and that is, as adjacent land to the airport comes available, it's very important the airport work with the State Department of Transportation to purchase all of the land it possibly can. We need to ensure that the area around the airport is defensible, in that we don't have development encroaching upon ends of runways that could damage the ability of larger planes to land there, or even the current planes, the business jets that use the airport. We've got to protect the areas around the airport from development. So as parcels of land come available, the Airport Advisory Board has been recommended to look at each piece and see what we can do, working with the FAA, with the Department of Transportation, to utilize grants to purchase that land to protect the airport. That's a very low cost to the city. The matches on those are very small, but the ultimate goal is to protect the airport long term. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is upcoming work. Another piece in our scope of work that we haven't yet started, because we wanted to wait until we presented in front of the council, is a strategic marketing plan. Now, this isn't just marketing, hey, we've got planes that fly out there and that. This is strategic in the I guess the goal that it will key out the pieces of the strategic plan that we're working out and market those pieces to the potential users. For example, with the low fuel, we've already started, the airport started marketing that through dispatchers who dispatch airplanes, through trade magazines. But we need to take a look at what are better ways to get in front of people who can stop in and fuel here. That's part of the plan. The other component that has come up through our meetings with the Airport Advisory Board and through the public that's come to speak with us is the fact that the name of the airport, as it is currently constructed, is an impediment. And you may think I'm talking about the Taylor in the airport name, and that's not it. It's the municipal. We've run into the fact with these low fuel prices that jet pilots who are flying for large companies hear municipal airport and they think we don't sell jet fuel because we're just a small airport for little small 3- and 4-seat private planes. What we need to do is with the Airport Advisory Board is work to understand how that name impacts our business and potentially recommend a change to municipal. I think several members of our group have spoken with the Taylor family. The Taylor family has said it's fine to think about that kind of name change. It's not our intention to take Taylor out of the name, but we may restructure the name so that people understand the types of services that we already have on the field. Municipal is limiting potential business. So we will be looking to bring a new brand. We will be looking to do a better job of community outreach as stated by both our vision and our mission, and come up with our marketing plans for our strategic initiatives as approved. So that's the next step. And with that, kept it as short as I could, I think. Happy to take questions.
Tom, do you want to make any comments? I have a few, and then we'll open it up for questions. And my comments are in no particular order. First of all, I want to thank you for a very comprehensive and very interesting plan here, Jack. I can't say enough about the work of that revamped advisory committee. I've attended several meetings, and I've seen the work and the input of the Gary Hansons and the Matt Duffys and the Paul Boricks to a good core of folks from the city. I gotta shout out to Bessie Chronopoulos, our former mayor, who has been, you know, her own version of an attack dog on this thing. She really, really cares about this airport, and she has continued to work with political figures throughout the region and the nation, for that matter, to keep Pete Taylor Municipal Airport in front of them. So a shout out to Bessie. Since I've been mayor, I've had discussions with Adam Kinsinger. I've had discussions with Randy Hultgren. Dick Durbin was in town at one time, and I know Bessie has worked with his staff. We need to continue to do that. We need to work the political venues, if you will, to make sure that folks know about what's happening at this airport. On the Section 139 plan, it was brought to my attention that football teams do not fly in here because they have 80 passengers or something. They fly to Rockford, their bus to Northern. We engaged the athletic director at NIU, Sean Frazier, who met with a number of state officials at the airport. And, you know, I agree, the Section 139 is going to cost a whale of money. We don't have that now. But if we can incrementally do some work towards that, that would be a wonderful thing, I think, for this airport to have. You mentioned the Taylor family. Again, we have made a number of overtures, have talked to them, and I'll be so bold as to suggest to the public tonight what I suggested to them. This is not a done deal. This is just off the top of my head, but can you envision the Pete Taylor Field at DeKalb Regional Airport? I mean, we've continued to embrace the Taylor family, so instrumental in this airport over the years, but we put that regional name on, and we've got to work hard to grow this into a regional facility. You know, how many times have we heard what's happening at the airport? You know, and as you say, are these a bunch of flyboys on a weekend flying their planes around? We need to engage the county. We need to engage Sycamore. We need to engage Genoa. We need to engage more folks in our county, in my opinion, to make this a truly regional effort. And believe me, and Tom maybe could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are other communities in DeKalb County, most notably Sycamore, that probably does more or benefits from more commercial landings on the cargo side than the city of DeKalb. Am I not correct? Tom shaking his head yes. So these are just a few thoughts that I had, And again, I appreciate your comments. I'd like to turn it over now to any questions or comments we might have from the council. Alderman Noriko.
First of all, I want to thank you for the effort you made with your recommendations to balance the needs of the airport with the financial realities of the city. You could easily have come in with an expensive wish list, which we couldn't have met. So I think you took a very realistic approach, and I appreciate that. One of my thoughts was with the greenhouse, connecting with Dan Kenny and the community gardens. I know they've looked at commercial kitchen options. They have the Walnut Grove facility for various types of plantings and so forth, working with individuals with intellectual disabilities. But they might well have contacts in terms of greenhouse production or have an interest in participating in that effort. In terms of the regional opportunities, I very much want to see that the other communities that both benefit now and potentially will benefit from airport operations participate in planning and growth. And certainly, as the mayor suggested, the contacts with legislators, the lobbying efforts, the informal contacts, that's something that other communities can participate in without significant cost to them. Although at some point, would it be appropriate, to come up with, something on the table? But I think this is a wonderful effort moving forward for the airport since I've been on the council. In looking at the budget, I'm like, oh, okay, we got to get this moving. And this clearly seems like an effort to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Any further comments from the council? Alderman Fanouken.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, if I may. You talked about an upfront cost if the conversion to UL 94 of about $25,000. I'm going to guess that's probably some equipment conversion that would need to be done to handle that fuel.
Yeah, it's a new tank essentially, and
Okay.
dispensing system.
All right, just so we're understanding where that was coming from. And you talked about our hangar rents being low. What, Tom, maybe you can better answer this question, but what's the typical hangar rent per month or per year now?
Well, right now with the small hangars, we're about, it's a small T hangar, about $264 a month. We've done hangar rent surveys for every 3 years for the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we're a little lower than in east of us, but it's all about location. So we're at that point. A Rochelle Airport or a Dixon Airport's lower than us. As you go east, again, it's all about location.
Sure.
They're about $100 more expensive than we are.
All right, thank you. And then my last question really goes back to the mission statement. The airport's an economic driver for Northern Illinois. Well, why doesn't it say DeKalb in Northern Illinois, since it is the DeKalb Airport?
So there were many debates over exactly how to word that. In the end, knowing that the long-term vision for this airport is not, essentially it isn't to distance it from DeKalb, but it's to try to include all the communities that are in the region. The decision was made to have a more inclusive piece of language in that particular statement by the board. Ultimately, it's your decision.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Fagan.
I've got two things, only one before, but now that you said that, I mean, I want to point out that it's Rockford O'Hare. Isn't it the way they phrase that up in Rockford?
Now they say Chicago Rockford.
Chicago Rockford. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
The other thing is, we got a lot of questions, and Tom, this is directed to you. If you want to clarify, different municipalities, different towns, their industries use our airport, but we do get money from those deliveries, don't we?
Correct. We get
Okay.
any time a cargo jet lands, we do get a unloading fee. We have a fuel fee, the ramp fee that they have to pay also. So yes, we do charge them to come into our airport and unload them.
Okay, and that, I just wanted to point that out, because we get a lot of pushback on that, saying that we pay for all the airport, and then
Right.
other communities use it, so thank you.
Alderman Verbeek.
But I think to dovetail Alderman Noriko, when you said something to the effect of something on the table, are you referring to a funding model, perhaps a regional funding model for the improvements or growth at the airport?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Favor.
So I had spoke to Bob before the meeting and told him I was really impressed with the report. And a couple of the things as you were reading through that I remembered what they were. So obviously I really appreciate the fact that you looked at things and you recognize that, maybe now is not the time to pay for them, but there are things we can do along the way that, as long as we're doing the work anyhow, we can check the box off on that 139 certification. I love the idea with the solar. I love the economic development ideas. I just love those ideas. I did have a question about the Swift fuel. I've been following aviation in the diesel conversions, but I hadn't really looked at alternative fuels. Is this, like if we went with the Swift fuel, is there going to be another alternative that comes out, that becomes more popular, the Betamax or the VHS, or is this going to be, the Swift fuel is going to be the FAA approved fuel for the older engines?
As we know it today, Swift is the way things are going. Whether or not there's some kind of, we hear a lot about biofuel coming up. The issue there is that we simply can't grow enough biomass to create enough fuel. So the things that we hear about electric airplanes too.
Yep.
I have a friend of mine who runs an airline and says in 10 years every plane in his fleet's going to be electric. I don't see evidence of that right now. What we're trying to do is work through things where we can better position the airport to have a market niche today as quickly as we can, and trying not to focus on things that just aren't true sustainable business models 10 years from now.
Right. No, I appreciate the report. I think it was excellent done, and Bob, you should, kudos to you and your board. Thank you, sir.
Alderman Marquardt.
That was going to be my question with the fuel. Is it something that older planes convert to, or just to get my head around it, like a car? I mean, when we went from having regular gas to unleaded gas, there was, you could still get leaded gas for a little bit type of thing, or is it something kind of like that?
Yeah, that's a good analogy right now. So it's an unleaded 94 octane, so it's not unlike a premium gas that you would buy. It's 2 points of the octane points above premium gas. It's designed to be burned more efficiently by aircraft that are burning low lead fuel today. So the idea is to transition to a more environmentally friendly and more efficient fuel, but allowing for that fuel to be purchased here when it's not available at a bunch of other airports, and it's attractive to people because it will burn more efficiently in their engine, is why it's a strategic option for us moving forward.
Would we keep the other fuel as well?
Yes, that's why
so
there's
it would be
development
an
costs. Additional offering
that we would offer. Okay. Had another question went on my head.
Well, while you're thinking of that, Mike, let me ask one. Tom, we expended some TIF dollars recently to win aviation. Did we not? Wasn't that some TIF money? Talk about win and talk about the potential of more wins, pardon the pun, at the airport.
Well, Win Aviation, what they do is they retrofit aircraft for parachuting and also retrofit aircraft to be leased out to other areas in the country of military and special use. So they started out with probably 6 or 7 employees. Now they have at least 25 employees out there. They've got 2 land leases with us, a brand new beautiful hangar that I think most of you have been in. I mean, they're going well. Now they're with the TIF money. In the first hangar they built at the airport, they're going to have an avionics shop or a radio shop on the airfield. So again, this brings different aircraft into the airport. They come, they get their radio work done, maybe they'll get some maintenance done, maybe they'll buy fuel. But this does bring additional aircraft onto the airport, and having an avionics shop on the airport, just again, it's another marketing tool for us, for people to come. So,
Mike, did you recall that second thought you had, or?
Well, it was about the hangars.
Okay.
So hangar development. So if I had a private investor, somewhat similar to, I don't know, building a storage facility someplace, and I had land and I'd build a storage facility and then I rent it out. If I were to approach the airport and say, I'm interested in building hangar space, then that would be a land lease and I would build a hangar and rent that out myself.
That's exactly it.
Type of deal. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, any other comments from council? Bob, I appreciate your you being here, and Matt Duffy and Gary Hansen and Paul Borick, members of the board. I really appreciate your participation and your input. Tom, you wanted to say something else? Yes.
Just a couple things. Recently, well, in July, it appears it was our best year with the fuel. Over 10,000 gallons of jet fuel, over 10,000 gallons of 100-octane fuel, so we had a $93,000 month last month. So that's what Jack talked about. We ran out of fuel for about 5 hours, but we got it back. Okay. The other thing that we were talking about is this Part 139, you know, taking steps to get there. About 2 months ago, I received a letter from the FAA and the Division of Aeronautics. They were programming $800,000 for runway improvements. I just got another letter last week. They're programming $1.2 million for phase 1 of our fence improvements. So those are 2 pieces of the puzzle to that 139 that we move toward. So
that's good news. Thanks. I know Joellen Charlton, our Community Development Director, had a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that Jack did provide in his report was some information about potential solar farm development on airport property. We have talked to the people who wish to have us consider that solar farm property, and we have a process outlined that they would need to go through. We don't currently have permitted or special use solar farms as a principal use entity on property. So we'd either need to undertake a text amendment or do a plan development, which is the same process that we're working with for the solar people looking for a facility on First and Gurler. So the only question I had for the council is, before we go through that zoning process, as the owner of the property, would the city want to go ahead and entertain that petition moving forward to request a rezoning on the property to plan development commercial to accommodate this use? If your head nod is yes at this point, we will give the applicants that information, knowing that, you know, we are authorized to sign the petition on behalf of the city to go through that process.
Did you see some nodding heads up here?
I did.
Okay, good, good. Okay, any other comments? And any other comments from you, Jack, Tom, Bob?
I would just close by saying I think the city is really fortunate to have the members of the board that you have. You've all noted that. I work, my firm works for 98 airports in North America, Canada, the US, Mexico. This is one of the best, most engaged groups on a board that we have seen, and I think the reason this report came out well is because of all the time they put in really ensuring that we were doing things that were achievable and not recommending things that were not. So I think all the credit goes to the board.
Have you ever found a better dressed chairman
Never.
than Mr. Owens?
I'm wearing a bow tie next time.
Okay, any other comments? I would entertain a motion to adjourn this committee of the whole.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. City Council begins promptly at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.